There's a moment in every relationship where the cracks in the foundation begin to show. Some people notice them right away. Others take years to realize they're standing on something that's slowly breaking apart. But me? I had no idea the ground beneath me was crumbling until it all came crashing down. It wasn't the shouting or the fights that clued me in. It wasn't even the cold silences that stretched on for days. No, it was the small, almost imperceptible things I'd dismissed over time because I didn't want to believe they meant anything. I never thought it could happen to me. That's always what you tell yourself. It won't happen to me. We're different. We're solid. That was my mistake. It started one evening, just like any other. I was sitting in the living room, watching the same show I'd watched 100 times before, when I heard Emma talking. Her voice was muffled at first, but it grew louder as I realized she was in the next room, talking to one of her friends on the phone. "Yeah, I don't know. I just don't think he cares anymore," she said, her tone casually dismissive, as if I wasn't even in the apartment. "I've been trying to talk to him about it, but he's just so distant. I don't even know if he's paying attention to me half the time." I froze. My heart started beating faster. Was she talking about me? Was I the one who was distant? My mind raced. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Emma had never talked about me like this before. At least, not to anyone. Not like this, with such finality, as though the distance she was referring to had already become a permanent thing. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the TV, pretending I couldn't hear her. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe I had misunderstood. But the words kept echoing in my head. He doesn't care anymore. I turned off the TV, stood up, and walked to the hallway. I hesitated before entering the room where she was talking. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, but I knew I had to say something. "Emma," I called out, my voice sounding far more unsure than I wanted it to. She immediately dropped the phone, her expression shifting from casual to defensive. "Oh, hey, I didn't know you were up. Who were you talking to?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She didn't answer right away. She stood there, visibly flustered, before replying, "Just Kate. We were talking about stuff." I nodded, but I couldn't shake the feeling in my gut. I could tell something was off. I wasn't angry, at least, not yet, but I was confused. There was a tension in the air that hadn't been there before. It wasn't the first time Emma had vented about me, but this time felt different. It felt like the beginning of something that couldn't be undone. "I heard you," I said quietly. She blinked, a flash of guilt crossing her face. "What do you mean?" "I heard you talking about me. About how I don't care," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. The silence between us thickened. She didn't deny it, didn't apologize. Instead, she sighed deeply, rubbing her forehead as if she had been holding something in for too long. "Frank," she said, her voice softer now, almost defeated. "I didn't mean for you to overhear that. But it's true. I don't know what happened, but I don't feel like you're here anymore. Not really." Those words hit me harder than anything she could have said. Not really. That was the problem, wasn't it? I hadn't been really there for months. Maybe longer. I had gotten caught up in my own head, my work, my routine. I thought everything would fix itself if I just kept doing what I was doing. But it didn't work that way, did it? I swallowed, trying to find the right words. "So, what do you want me to do about it?" Emma's gaze dropped to the floor. "I don't know. I just want things to feel normal again. To feel like you actually care." It felt like a slap in the face, but not in the way I expected. It wasn't harsh. It wasn't spiteful. It was just sad. She was asking for something I had stopped giving a long time ago, and I hadn't even realized it. "I'm trying," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew they sounded hollow. I wasn't sure I knew how to fix this anymore. Her eyes were tired when she looked up at me, but there was something else there too. It wasn't just disappointment, it was resignation. The kind of resignation that comes when you realize something is beyond saving, even though you don't want to admit it. "I don't want to fight about this, Frank," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just don't know if I can keep pretending that everything's okay." I nodded, even though inside, my world was slowly cracking open. There was nothing left to say. The truth was out in the open, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. I wasn't the man she needed. I hadn't been for a long time. And she wasn't the woman I thought I had married. I stood there, at a loss for words, as Emma turned and walked away. I heard her retreat to our bedroom, the door closing softly behind her. And for a long time, I just stood there, staring at the empty space where she had been. The realization hit me then. This wasn't just a rough patch. This wasn't just another argument. This was the moment everything changed. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if I wanted to fix it. That night, after Emma retreated to the bedroom, I sat alone on the couch, replaying her words over and over in my mind. I don't know if I can keep pretending. It felt like a punch to the gut. For a while, I just sat there, staring at the empty space between us, unsure of what to do next. Should I go in there and talk to her? Should I try to fix this? But the truth was, I didn't even know what needed fixing. The silence in the apartment was deafening. The kind of silence that settles in after something unsaid lingers in the air for too long. It's the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're suffocating, yet you're not sure whether to break it or let it consume you. I wanted to shout, to tell her everything I was feeling, but I knew that wouldn't help. It never did. Words weren't enough anymore. I had told myself I was trying, but trying wasn't the same as doing. And Emma knew it. The night dragged on, but I didn't sleep. My mind raced through every moment of our relationship. Those little moments that now seemed so significant. The way she used to smile at me across the dinner table, how we'd laugh over silly inside jokes, the times when we'd stay up late talking about our dreams and fears. It felt like a lifetime ago. Somewhere along the way, those moments had faded, and neither of us had noticed. Not until tonight. I thought about going to her, trying to talk it through, but a strange, unfamiliar feeling kept me where I was. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt. I was just lost. In a way, I had expected this, deep down. We had both been drifting for months, maybe even longer. We just didn't want to admit it. By the time morning came, I still hadn't made up my mind. I couldn't fix this in one conversation. I knew that. But could we even fix it at all? I heard Emma moving around in the bedroom, the sound of her getting dressed. The apartment was still, but I could feel the tension building. I should have said something. I should have tried to reach out, but the words caught in my throat. I was waiting for her to make the first move, waiting for her to decide if this was worth saving, too. When she walked into the living room, I felt a rush of anticipation. She wasn't angry. Not yet, anyway. But the way she avoided looking at me told me everything I needed to know. She was still processing what had happened, just like I was. But where did we go from here? Could things really go back to the way they were? Frank, she said, her voice quieter than usual. It was the kind of tone that made me feel like we were already standing at the edge of a cliff. We need to talk. It was then that I realized. Talking might not be enough. Maybe words were never enough. The words hung between us in the quiet room like a heavy fog. We need to talk. Emma's voice didn't sound like the woman I married. There was no urgency in it, no warmth. It felt almost detached, like we were two strangers having a casual conversation about a minor issue. But deep down, I knew this wasn't minor. It wasn't just another disagreement. It was everything. I stood up from the couch, my legs feeling unsteady. I didn't know what I was expecting. A tearful apology? A promise to work through things? But the truth is, I wasn't sure I wanted any of that anymore. My mind kept racing back to her words from last night. I don't think I can keep pretending. I'd heard them over and over, each time cutting deeper than before. Emma walked past me without making eye contact, heading toward the kitchen. She opened the fridge, but didn't take anything out. She just stood there for a moment, her back to me. I could feel the distance, the invisible barrier that had grown between us in the last few months. It had started as something small, a missed dinner, a quiet weekend, until now, when it felt like a chasm I couldn't cross. Do you really want to fix this, Emma? I finally asked, my voice low, trying to keep the frustration from seeping through. She turned slowly, as if the question had caught her off guard. Her eyes didn't meet mine right away, but when they did, I saw something I hadn't expected: vulnerability. I don't know, she admitted softly. I've been asking myself that a lot lately. I don't know if we can fix this, Frank. I don't know if we even want it anymore. The words hit harder than I thought they would. In that moment, it wasn't her disappointment that hurt me. It was the truth. She was right. Somewhere along the way, we had stopped trying to hold on. We were both stuck in this rut, too afraid to make the first move. Too afraid to admit what had been so obvious for a while. We were drifting. And the worst part? Neither of us had the courage to pull the other back. The silence stretched on for a long time. Neither of us moved. It was as if we were both waiting for something, anything, to change. But the more I stood there, the more I realized we weren't waiting for change. We were waiting for permission to let go. Maybe it's time, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Maybe it's time we both stopped pretending. Emma's eyes softened, but she didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her silence spoke louder than anything she could say. We both knew this was the beginning of the end. I should have felt anger. I should have been furious at the way things had turned out. But strangely, I felt something else, relief. Maybe we had reached the point where pretending was no longer an option. Maybe we had finally reached the point where we could stop hurting each other with false hopes. Emma took a deep breath, her gaze drifting to the floor. I never wanted it to be like this, Frank, she said, her voice cracking slightly. But I don't know how to fix it anymore. I don't know if I can. And just like that, the final nail in the coffin was hammered in. I didn't know if I could fix it either. Maybe it was too late for that. Maybe it had always been too late, and I was just too blind to see it. The air between us was thick with unsaid words, but neither of us dared to speak them. Emma stood there, looking at me with a mixture of sadness and exhaustion, as if she'd already fought this battle in her head 1,000 times before, and now she was just waiting for me to catch up. But I couldn't. I couldn't process it all at once, couldn't wrap my mind around the idea that the woman I'd shared everything with for years was telling me that maybe it was over. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. I just stared at her, willing myself to feel something. Anger. Betrayal. Something. But there was nothing. Just this crushing sense of inevitability. We had both been living in the shadow of this moment for far too long. You've been distant too, Frank, she said, breaking the silence, her voice quieter now. I know I've been distant too, but I can't help but wonder. If you really care, why haven't you tried to fight for us? Why didn't you fight for me? Her words landed like a slap. For a moment, I wanted to argue, to tell her that I had tried, that I had been there for her, even when it felt like she was miles away. But the truth was, I couldn't. I had been distant too. I had been too caught up in my own world, my own work, my own frustrations. I had stopped fighting for us a long time ago. I thought we were fine. I whispered, my voice barely audible. I thought you'd tell me if something was wrong. I did tell you, Frank, Emma replied, her voice tinged with bitterness now. You just didn't hear me. Or maybe you didn't want to hear me. She was right. I hadn't listened. I had been so focused on keeping everything together that I hadn't realized she was already falling apart. I hadn't noticed how she had withdrawn, how she had become a stranger to me in the way she spoke, in the way she moved through our home. It was as though we were two people sharing the same space, but not the same life. I'm sorry, I said, but the words felt hollow. I wasn't even sure if I meant them. Did I feel sorry for her? For me? Or for both of us? Maybe I was just apologizing because I didn't know how else to respond. Emma looked at me for a long time, her eyes searching mine as if she was looking for something, anything, to hold on to. But there was nothing left. Nothing but the silence between us and the broken pieces of a relationship neither of us knew how to fix. I don't know if I can do this anymore, Frank, she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. I'm tired. I'm tired of pretending, tired of trying to convince myself that things will get better. I don't think they will. It was the final admission, the one we had both been avoiding. She was done. She had made her decision, and I had to respect it, even though it felt like my world was crumbling around me. But I couldn't bring myself to say it. I couldn't bring myself to tell her it was okay, that I understood. Because deep down, I knew it wasn't okay. I knew that once those words were spoken, there would be no going back. And then she said something that I didn't expect. I don't want to hurt you, Frank. I never did. But I think we've been holding on to something that doesn't exist anymore. Her words hit me harder than anything else. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that we could fix it, that we could try again. But I knew it wasn't that simple. We couldn't just erase all the years of distance, all the unspoken resentment, with a few words. It wasn't that easy. And so we stood there, two people who once shared everything, but now had nothing left to say. The weight of the moment settled over us, and I realized that maybe we had already given up long before we admitted it. The room felt colder now, almost suffocating. I could see the way Emma stood there, her arms crossed, her posture guarded. Her lips were pressed tight, like she was holding back a torrent of words, but nothing came out. And I didn't know what to say either. What could I say at this point? It felt like the moment had already passed. We had both been hanging on to something that had already slipped away, and the sad truth was that neither of us knew how to stop it. I took a slow, shaky breath. Is this really what you want, Emma? My voice cracked, but I couldn't stop it. I had to ask. I needed to know if she was sure about this. If we were sure. I don't know anymore, Frank, she said, her voice quieter now. She turned away, pacing toward the kitchen again, her back to me. I could feel her pulling further away with every step. I'm so tired of trying to hold this together. And you? She stopped in her tracks. You've been so distant. I don't think you even realize how much you've pulled away. I didn't have a response. What could I say? She was right. I had pulled away. The problem was that I didn't know how to fix it, how to come back. It had been so gradual, so sneaky. Each day, we both gave a little less. And now, there was nothing left. I'm sorry, I said again, my voice barely audible. Emma let out a sigh, a sad, heavy sound. She turned around, her eyes wet with unshed tears. Sorry doesn't fix anything, Frank. I needed you. I needed you to be present. And now? Her words trailed off, swallowed by the silence that followed. For a moment, we just stood there, not moving, not speaking. It felt like the world was holding its breath. She had been the one to pull away first, but I wasn't innocent. I hadn't fought for us the way I should have. The truth was, I had stopped fighting a long time ago. And now, it was too late. Emma took a deep breath, shaking her head as if she was trying to clear it. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending everything's fine. We're both lying to ourselves. It was like a punch to the chest. We were both guilty, both so tangled in the lies we had told ourselves for so long that it was impossible to see the truth until it was too late. I guess we're both at the end of the line then, I said softly, the weight of the realization settling in my chest. I don't know what to do anymore, Emma. I don't know what comes after this. I don't either, she whispered, her eyes on the floor. But I know I can't keep going like this. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't just the end of our relationship. It was the end of the person I thought I was. The man who believed everything would work itself out. The man who always thought he could make things better if he just tried harder. Now I saw that trying wasn't enough anymore. We needed more than that. We needed connection, honesty, effort, and somewhere along the way, we had lost all of it. I watched Emma turn back toward the bedroom, her footsteps slow, as though each step was another brick being placed between us. I knew, in the pit of my stomach, that this might be the last time we were in the same room like this. And I couldn't stop it. I couldn't even bring myself to stop her. I didn't follow her. I couldn't. She had made her decision, and as much as it hurt, I had to respect it. But still, I stood there in the living room, the silence pressing down on me like a heavy weight. The apartment felt so empty now, like a hollow shell where echoes of our past still lingered. I could hear her moving around in the bedroom, the sound of drawers opening, the faint rustle of clothes, but I didn't dare interrupt. For the first time in years, I wasn't sure what the right thing to do was. Normally, I would have barged in, tried to fix it, to make things right, but not now. There was no fixing this. There was no magic phrase that would erase the months of neglect, of distance, of pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I had reached the point where I knew, deep down, it was beyond repair. I thought about all the things I could have done differently. All the moments I had let slip by because I thought there would always be time to fix things later. But there was no later now. Later had run out. And then I heard her. Emma's voice, muffled but unmistakable, came from the bedroom. It wasn't directed at me, but the words sliced through the air anyway. I never wanted to hurt him. Her voice trembled slightly, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But no, there was no anger, no bitterness in her tone, just regret. A kind of sadness that weighed more than any fight we'd ever had. But I think I already have. I couldn't stay in the living room any longer. It felt like I was suffocating in the quiet. I needed air, I needed space, anything to clear my head. Without thinking, I grabbed my jacket and walked out the door. The chill of the night air hit me like a slap in the face, but it wasn't enough to numb the ache in my chest. I needed more distance, more time to process what was happening, more time to figure out how we had come to this point. I didn't know where I was going. I just walked. I walked until I reached the park, the one we used to visit on weekends. It seemed so far removed from the chaos that had unfolded inside our apartment. The park was quiet, almost deserted at this hour. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the path, and for a brief moment, I felt a sense of peace. Maybe it was the stillness, or maybe it was just the fact that for the first time in a long while, I wasn't trapped in a conversation I didn't know how to have. But the peace didn't last. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Emma. "I'm sorry, Frank. I don't know what to say. I don't know if we can fix this." I stared at the screen for a long moment, the words sinking in deeper than I wanted to admit. I knew what she was trying to say. She was sorry, but sorry wasn't enough anymore. Sorry didn't change the fact that we had lost each other somewhere along the way. Sorry didn't fix the distance between us. But as I stood there, the phone still in my hand, I realized something. I was done fighting for something that wasn't there anymore. I wasn't angry. I wasn't resentful. I just didn't want to keep pretending either. I replied, typing the first thing that came to mind. "It's okay, Emma. I think we both know this is the end." And I sent it. I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me after hitting send. It was like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, but at the same time, I felt the emptiness grow inside me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was just empty. The truth was, we had already said goodbye to each other long before we admitted it. The moment had come, and I knew I couldn't force something that wasn't there anymore. It was over. As I stood there in the park, staring at my phone, I couldn't help but wonder, how had we gotten here? How had we let it slip away? And more importantly, where would we go from here? The phone in my hand buzzed again. Another message from Emma, but this one felt different. Her words came across as desperate, as though she was scrambling for something, anything, to hold on to. "I didn't want this, Frank. I don't know if I can live with myself for doing this to you." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. What could I say to that? Could I console her? Could I offer some sort of reassurance that everything would be okay? No, I couldn't. It wasn't going to be okay. Nothing would ever be the same after tonight. I typed a reply, but it wasn't comforting. I couldn't lie to her. I couldn't pretend like everything was fine. "We've been losing each other for a while now, Emma. It wasn't just tonight. This has been coming for months." I hit send, and then I stared at the screen, waiting for her response. I knew what it would be. She'd apologize again. She'd say she didn't want it to end like this. And maybe, if I'd read her words a little longer, I would have convinced myself to go back, to try to fix it one last time. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't work. We were both too far gone. My phone buzzed again. Her message was short, almost detached. "Maybe you're right. Maybe we've both been pretending." I felt a pang in my chest. It hurt in a way I didn't expect. But there was a finality in those words. A truth neither of us could ignore anymore. I didn't reply. I couldn't. There was nothing left to say. The next few hours were a blur. I walked aimlessly, unsure of where I was headed. My thoughts were scattered, and the weight of the situation pressed down on me with every step I took. I passed by familiar places, spots Emma and I used to visit when we were happy, but they felt foreign now. The memories of those places no longer held the warmth they once did. They only reminded me of what we had lost. Eventually, I found myself at the same park again, the one where I had stood earlier. The moonlight illuminated the path ahead, and everything felt eerily quiet. It was the kind of stillness that made you feel small, insignificant, like nothing mattered anymore. And in that moment, I realized how true it was. Nothing really mattered. I thought about all the times we had fought, the late-night arguments, the misunderstandings, the silence that would stretch on for days. They seemed so petty now, so insignificant compared to what we were facing. The love we once had, the connection, it was all slipping through our fingers. But as I stood there, I started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, we were both better off. We were both broken in ways I didn't think could be fixed. And if this was the end, perhaps it was a mercy. Perhaps we both needed to walk away. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was just tired. It's strange how life works. Sometimes, the hardest decisions are the ones that set you free. The next morning, I woke up with a feeling I hadn't had in a long time. Peace. I didn't feel the weight of guilt or regret. I wasn't angry at Emma, and I wasn't angry at myself either. I had spent so many nights wrestling with what we were losing, but now, I realized something. Sometimes, the best thing for both people in a relationship is to let go. I stood up and walked to the window, watching the sunlight pour in. The world outside felt different. The noise of the city seemed distant now, and in that silence, I found clarity. It wasn't the end of everything. It was the beginning of something new. I took a deep breath, letting the fresh air fill my lungs. I was starting to understand that life wasn't about holding on to things that were already broken. It was about moving forward, about finding peace within yourself and letting go of the past. I pulled out my phone, typing a message to Emma. It wasn't a long message, but it felt like the right thing to say. We're both better off this way. I'll always care about you, but we need to move forward. I hope you find the happiness you deserve. I hit send, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was making the right decision. It wasn't about fixing the past. It was about accepting it and learning from it. The phone buzzed a few minutes later, and her reply came. I agree. Thank you, Frank. I hope you find peace too. I smiled to myself. It wasn't the ideal ending, but it was the one we both needed. We were both moving forward, starting new chapters in our lives. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't scared of what the future held. I was ready to embrace it. Maybe, in the end, it wasn't about finding the perfect relationship. Maybe it was about learning to be okay with yourself first. I stepped outside, the sun warming my face, and I knew that life would move on, one step at a time. And this time, I was ready to take that step.